A common misconception is that the German tanks were moving towards the battlefield on their own, covering hundreds of kilometers. The most common way for tanks to be transported during the Second World War was by rail. All German tanks, equipment, horses, trucks, and supplies of all kinds were transported by the trains of the Deutsche Reichsbahn, the German National Railway. The Reichsbahn had an important logistic role in supporting the rapid movement of the German army during World War II. A full-strength Panzer division needed no less than 80 trains, each train with up to 55 wagons. The Kriegsbauart, or wartime class, refers to railway goods wagon classes that were developed during the war for the Deutsche Reichsbahn. The start of the war was a kind of a dividing line for the classification of goods wagons, but did not represent any technological change. In the period shortly before the war, goods wagons were already being designed from a military perspective. The cause of this was the rapid increase in transportation tasks because the railways in Germany were sucked into the events of the war as never before. The Deutsche Reichsbahn was seen as an indispensable partner of the regime. Transport of all new and much needed tanks, military equipment and supplies to the front line were given number one priority. The transportation of tanks close to the front line was relatively problem-free in Western Europe. The German army, like almost all European armies, used the normal gauge rail. The first serious transport challenge the Germans faced was in the Soviet territories with the Soviet gauge railway lines. It is important to state that this issue was well known by the Germans since World War I. The Germans made available a large workforce of prisoners with military guards to rebuild the Soviet-wide gauge railways to the German normal gauge. This was basically the main task of the so-called Eisenbahntruppen, or the railway troops. They built, repaired, operated, or, in the second part of the war, destroyed military relevant railway lines and associated infrastructure. During Operation Barbarossa, this reconstruction was performed stunningly fast. The first German normal gauge train rolled in at the Smolensk Central Station only 1 week after the German tanks and motorized forces had conquered the city. Until early 1942, all the main and a lot of the smaller Soviet railway lines were rebuilt to German normal gauge in the German-occupied Soviet territories. During the unavoidably time gap of 1 to 2 weeks from the tank and motorized infantry spearheads had occupied new territories, until the railway lines through these newly won territories had been rebuilt to the normal gauge, the German army had to rely only on their truck-based supply columns. These truck columns had an operational limit of about 200 kilometers during Operation Barbarossa. This general distance could be reached in 1 day. Their maximum operational limit was approximately 400 kilometers. Of course, this depended on the road quality and conditions, the time of the year, and the related general weather conditions. After the trains brought the supplies and the tanks to the army railhead dumps established as close as possible to the front lines. Mainly trucks brought the supplies from these dumps to the army and divisional dumps. On shorter distances from these locations, horses were also used. Horses were pretty extensively used on the last distribution leg from the battalion supply points to the front line. As the front line was moving forward, the reconstructed railway lines stepwise extended. The railheads accordingly moved forward too, as were the rest of the supply link. Such was the German blitzkrieg and the tank transportation performed between 1939 and late 1942. This method was simple yet very effective. It defeated Poland in 4 weeks, the Low Countries in 10 days, France in 6 weeks, Yugoslavia in 2 weeks, and pushed the Soviets some 1,000 kilometers back to Leningrad, Moscow, and Rostov during 5 months in 1941 and put them close to a defeat. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you and see you in the next video.